There's so much different advice out there telling you how to grow on LinkedIn. Sometimes it's impossible to know what to actually listen to. So to clear up that confusion, in this video, I'll be breaking down the easiest way to grow on LinkedIn. This is the exact step-by-step strategy I've used to grow my own personal account to over 40,000 followers. So if I had to start over completely from scratch, this is what I'd do. First thing I'd do is dial in my account positioning. And in order to do that effectively, I need to understand why I'm posting on LinkedIn. There's 3 potential reasons why you might want to post to LinkedIn. Number 1, obviously lead gen. You want to book more demos, get more leads for your business. Number 2 is recruiting. You might be more interested in attracting talent. You might need to be hiring. For me personally, at our content agency, I've been less worried about lead gen over the past 6-7 months and more worried about finding good talent. And third is attracting investors. So if you're trying to raise VC money and raise a round for your startup, you're going to want to use LinkedIn and content as a way to position yourself as an attractive company for investors. Now, the important thing to understand is there may be trade-offs in choosing each of those 3 goals. There is some overlap, but you may not always be able to actively pursue all 3 at any given time with your LinkedIn content. The content that attracts recruits may not be the same content that attracts leads. So you may have to make a trade-off there. And at the start, with the foundation of the strategy, you need to understand what the goal of posting content is for you. Now, once you have that dialed in, you want to answer what I call the golden question. What's the one reason why someone in your target audience would follow you on LinkedIn? If you can't articulate your answer to that question in one simple sentence, you have work to do. And ideally, you have some sort of experience that has led you to start this particular company. For example, I used to run content at a startup. Now I run a content agency. My experience running content in a startup led me to start this company. In my experience creating content across hundreds of accounts, credibility is a performance multiplier. When you have credibility, your content just automatically performs better, even if it's not optimized perfectly for performance on LinkedIn. There's one more thing you need to consider with account positioning. For an account to grow fast on social, you either need to provide massive amounts of value or entertainment. If you provide neither, you're kind of irrelevant. And in my experience working with B2B founders, I recommend leaning into the value angle. And again, answering that golden question informs what type of value you're going to give to your target audience. Now, let's make sure your profile is set up, because if you're going to go about posting content consistently, which we'll get into in a second, you want to make sure that you're capturing as many of those eyeballs as possible and turning them into followers and ultimately leads and customers. If your profile is not set up properly, those leads and potential customers that are coming through are going to slip through the cracks, and they're going to come to your profile, bounce, and never come back again. So we want to avoid that. First things first, you want to make sure you have a nice, clear profile picture. Don't overcomplicate this. Just make sure you have some sort of professional headshot. Don't take a selfie. Don't do any weird poses. Just keep it simple. Corporate headshot. Your header's kind of overrated. It can help if you have a branded header, but you don't really need to do that. Mine is just this tweet screenshot that I've had for the past couple of years, and it works fine. Once you have your profile picture dialed in, you'll move on to your headline, which is this line of text below your name. And the formula here is simple as well. All you're going to do is include your role, which will likely be founder or CEO, your company, Compound, and then a co-founder of Bluecast. And after that, you'll include a 1-line summary of the value you're going to provide to your audience. And this will be in alignment with your golden question. So in my profile, for example, I have building a social media agency for B2B companies. So this allows people to see when they come to my profile, at a glance, they understand what I'm posting about. If they want to grow on social, on LinkedIn, they're going to follow me. Now, founders love to overcomplicate their about section. It doesn't need to be that complicated. If you look at mine, it's pretty short. Just include a 1 or 2 line summary of what you do and what value you provide. I like to include a line of social proof, so including, in my case, the number of companies we've worked with and the amount of time I've been doing it. And then I also have a call to action to my newsletter, because I want to, again, drive people from my LinkedIn profile to an owned audience like a newsletter. If you don't have a newsletter yet, it's okay. But if you do, or you have some sort of lead magnet, I like using the about section to give a sort of call to action to it. After the about section is your featured links. This is one of the areas that's unique to LinkedIn compared to other social platforms, and I love this. It's extremely valuable, yet a lot of founders mess up this real estate and don't use it as effectively as they can. Your goal with your featured link is to move your audience to the next obvious step in your funnel. So in my case, I, again, move them to my newsletter. I want people to go from my LinkedIn to my newsletter and subscribe, where they're going to get nurtured week after week, day after day, with emails and essays that are hitting their inbox. If you have a newsletter, I would make that one of your featured links. If you don't, and you have some sort of other lead magnet, have that be your featured link. If you don't have a lead magnet at all, you can just have that featured featured link go to your homepage or your book a demo page. I would also include some sort of social proof like a case study. I actually don't have one in my featured links, but if I go to another profile, I can see here on Austin's profile that he has his case study with Perplexity front and center in the featured link section. This is great because you have some sort of social proof that shows what your product does and examples of it working for other companies. And then you have your call to action to your newsletter, lead magnet, or book a demo page that moves that audience down the funnel. Now, quick note with featured links, don't include too many. LinkedIn lets you include tons of them. I think it's like 5 or 10. It gets very overwhelming very quickly. And on the topic of links, you'll obviously want to make sure your main link in bio is set up. Again, I'd have this go to your homepage or your newsletter or lead magnet, whichever one is most relevant. And then the last thing I'll say on profile setup is you want to have your custom button made. LinkedIn has this cool feature where if I go to a post, for example, here, you can see next to my profile picture, I have this view my newsletter button. And this appears in feed. So without anyone having to click over to your profile, they can actually go and opt in for your newsletter. And by the way, if you want to sign up for mine, the link is in the description, or you can have them go directly to a book a demo page. And again, that shows up in feed. So all you're going to do to set that up is go to your profile, go to this edit profile button, little pencil, and then scroll down and click edit custom button. Then you can set that up here. Now that you've got your account set up and the overall direction set, let's talk about the specific content strategy. So exactly what you should be posting and how often to grow your audience and get more leads from LinkedIn. The first piece to this is building your content funnel. A lot of times founders will just post random topics and there's no method to their madness. In reality, you want to be very intentional about the topics that you're choosing in order to maximize for visibility and engagement while also converting that visibility into potential customers. And building a content funnel is the simplest way I've found to organize topics. Now, there are 3 parts to this content funnel: top, middle, and bottom of funnel content. Top of funnel content is typically broad founder life or work life content that optimizes for visibility. It's often a bit more polarizing. And again, we're going for a very broad target audience. This post from Sebastian, the CEO at Rilla, is a perfect example. It's going over their work-life culture. And you see in the hook, it's very polarizing. We're ruthlessly intense at Rilla. I think 12-hour workdays, 6 days per week in the office, but we're also insanely generous and devoted for fun. Notice how this post topic isn't directly related to the product Rilla itself, but it's a broader work-life topic like in-office, work-life balance, that sort of stuff that really hits on LinkedIn. And the post popped off. It got almost 300 likes and a lot of comments, many of which were actually not that supportive, but that's kind of the point in a lot of these posts. You want to create some sort of polarizing conversation. Middle of funnel content is thought leadership content that's meant to establish you as an authority. This is the bulk of where your LinkedIn content is going to come from because it's not a direct sales pitch, but it's specific enough that it's only reaching your target audience. So you can grow an audience with it, and that content is most likely targeted towards the right people versus top of funnel content being a bit more broad. This post from Michelle Lieben is a great example of middle of funnel content. He talks about the go-to-market funnel that took his agency from $0 to $6 million in ARR. And this is a great example of middle of funnel content because they sell go-to-market services for companies. So he's just sharing valuable resources on how they actually did it for themselves. And it kind of functions a little bit as a bottom of funnel post or sort of case study, but it's not directly pitching cold IQ. It's more just giving value up front to establish Michelle as the expert in go-to-market and outbound. The next piece of the content funnel is bottom of funnel content. This is perhaps the most straightforward and the type of content that founders are most familiar with, which is product-related content. These are your sales pitches. You need to be promoting your product in your content. People will say never promote your product ever in your content. I don't necessarily agree with that. You shouldn't overdo it. But again, the goal with LinkedIn in many cases is to grow your audience so you can get more customers. The most classic example of bottom of funnel posts are case studies. I mentioned them earlier when we were talking about featured links, and they are a tried and true format for LinkedIn content. They're pretty boring. They're not that exciting, but they always seem to do well, especially if you have a case study with a notable company. So for example, Jesse announced this case study that Decagon did with Chime, and it got over 300 likes. Case studies generally perform well when you frame them as a milestone. If you're like, oh, I'm so excited that we work with this company, people will celebrate that, and you get the benefit of it being a bottom of funnel content piece. So if you're looking to include more sales pitches in your content, the easiest way to do that without totally torching your reach is to just do case studies semi-regularly. And if you're so early that you don't have any case studies, you should probably just stick to middle and top of funnel content to build your audience anyway. Now that you understand the different content types, how often should you post on LinkedIn? Is there an optimal cadence? And the answer is yes. If you're only posting 1 time per week on LinkedIn, you're not going to get results. I'm sorry to tell you. Same thing if you're only posting every other week. If you're not consistent, don't expect to generate leads or get recruits from LinkedIn. It's just not going to work. Now, there are different levels to how often you can post on LinkedIn. At its most extreme, you can post 2 times times per day and be fine. I wouldn't even recommend that. I don't even do that, and I run a content agency. 5 times per week is the ideal cadence I would recommend, but if we're truly starting from scratch and this video is about the easiest way to grow on LinkedIn, I would start with 3 times per week. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Keep it simple. Start with a sustainable cadence to build the reps, and then when you build capacity, then go to 5. So start with 3 times per week, and if we look at the content funnel model we just talked about, you'll do 1 top of funnel piece of content, 1 middle of funnel piece of content, and 1 bottom of funnel piece of content. Now, if you're so early that you don't have any case studies, or you really want to optimize just purely for audience growth, you're okay to delay gratification a bit and not generate leads right away, I would go 1 top of funnel piece of content and then 2 middle of funnel pieces of content per week. And as far as timing, don't overthink this, but I would recommend getting your posts out sometime mid-morning local time. The only thing that I would avoid is posting outside of work hours. So for example, I would not post at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday evening, or especially not like 8 p.m. on a Saturday evening. Your content's just not going to do that well if you post it then. Now, really quick, I want to mention for all the founders out there watching this that what you're watching right now is the easiest way to grow on LinkedIn if you're doing it yourself. But truth is, the easiest way, hands down, to grow on the platform is to work with a team that already knows what they're doing and has done this for tens and hundreds of other founders. So before we move on to the next half of the video, I should mention that this is exactly what we do with founders at Compound. We're actively helping dozens of founders grow on LinkedIn while they're still building their companies and focus on recruiting and all the other things that require attention as a founder. We have the systems in place to keep them consistent with content and growing their audience so they can get the benefits of it without having to spend hours and hours every day writing content. So if that piques your interest and you're really trying to level up your LinkedIn content without spending tons of time on it, I'll drop the waitlist link in the description below. We are at capacity right now, but we will have some spots opening up in the next month or so. So check out that waitlist and I'll be in touch. Now, I have at least 5 conversations every week with founders who are trying to start posting on LinkedIn, but they run into the same problem. They don't know what to post about. Even with the content funnel framework, they sit down in front of a blank page and they just freeze. They don't know what to write about, what's going to be relevant, what their audience wants to hear. And I have a simple rule to fix this problem forever. Never sit down to draft in front of a blank page. Writer's block happens because you don't have anything to grab onto. You sit in front of a blank Google Doc and just hope that the idea comes to you. In reality, the best writers and marketers all have ideas sitting around in a notes folder, in a swipe file, and they're never actually starting from scratch. And the way that you get to this point and solve writer's block forever is to just bookmark stuff aggressively. As you're using your own social timeline, specifically on LinkedIn for the purpose of this video, when you see content that catches your attention, bookmark it. You can either save it on LinkedIn in the platform or just screenshot it and then have a folder in your camera roll for your screenshots that you can go back and review. In addition to just going by your own interest, look at other influencers in your category. What content are they doing? You shouldn't copy them, but you can get inspiration on what formats are working or what their audience might want to hear and give your own take or use your own format in a similar way to get attention on the LinkedIn feed. So I'll give you an example of what this might look like in practice using another post from Sebastian at Rilla. Say I was scrolling and I saw this post on my timeline. I decided to save it because it caught my attention. And if I look at this post, there are 3 distinct areas that catch my attention that I can then go and apply in my next piece of content that I write. So the first area I see is the specific numbers in the hook. So in the hook, Sebastian writes, "We just spent $250,000 bringing the entire Rilla team to Cape Cod." So that $250,000 monetary figure catches my attention. That's a very specific strategy that often works well in LinkedIn content. So using specific numbers in the hooks, specifically monetary figures. The second area is the negativity bias. It was our worst planned offsite yet, and 1 person got injured. They're okay. But notice how he leads with that. It was the worst offsite yet. Why was it so bad? What happened? What went wrong? How did this person get injured? Those are all things that are going through my mind as I first saw the post on my timeline. And you can use that negativity bias in your own content. And the third facet of this LinkedIn post that caught my attention is the actual image itself. So the image of a nice, it almost looks like a mansion or at least a very nice house, paired with the $250,000 figure in the hook gives me this curiosity. I want to find out, like, why did they spend this much money on this house? Like, what possibly could have been the reason for that? Just taking a simple examination of this one piece of content, I've already come away with 3 specific strategies that I can then use in my next post. And even just taking a step back and looking at the idea as a whole, this is an offsite recap post. And I see this work time and time again across the founder clients we work with. So then I could take that and say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to sit down and write a recap of the recent offsite we did or of a recent team meeting that we did in person. And notice how I'm no longer starting from a blank page. I already have an idea I'm working with and a framework to adopt that I can use to execute that idea. And I'll give you another easy framework that you could steal straight from this video. It's the origin story post. And we run this with pretty much every client at Compound. Almost every time, it's the first post that we'll publish for a client, and it's consistently an outlier. So here's an example, again, using Sebastian as the reference here. This is a story of how he started Rilla, and I'll let you pause and screenshot this post if you want to reference it. But notice how we tell the origin story of how he started as a stand-up comedian and then went and pivoted into tech startups. And it's quite a winding story, and it makes for a compelling post. Your audience wants to hear that, and it's consistently one of the best performing pieces of content. And one other pro tip here is look at the image. So using an IRL photo from the early days of your company is an easy way to make sure this post does well. And here's another example of an origin story that did quite well. And notice this one doesn't have an image, so you don't have to use an image in every single origin story post. But if you have one, I'd use it. If not, it's okay. And here's a reference that you could screenshot again for inspiration as you're writing your own. Now, none of the strategies that we discussed so far are going to work if you ignore this next step. Outbound engagement. If you're just posting and ghosting without any other engagement, you're not going to get momentum on the platform, especially in the early days. Most founders, when they start posting, if they don't already have an audience, are going to suffer from what's called a cold start problem. The LinkedIn algorithm isn't serving your content to other people, and you're also not engaging, so people aren't given a reason to engage on your content. And the easiest way to get around this is to do outbound engagement. And the cool thing about LinkedIn as a platform is that you can brute force your way into people's feeds without relying on the algorithm. And there are two pieces to this. Number one is outbound commenting. So going and commenting on other people's content. Comments are another form of content. So if you leave thoughtful comments on other content, people may click through to your own profile. And if you're posting content consistently with the frameworks we've discussed so far, they may stick around and follow you. And now they're going to engage on your stuff going forward. So comments are kind of like billboards for your profile as long as you use them thoughtfully. Secondly, oftentimes when you comment on someone's post, they're going to go check out your profile themselves and they're going to start to reciprocate. I've seen this happen so many times. And funny enough, I've actually made a lot of friends this way, even taking the relationship off of the LinkedIn timeline, off the Twitter timeline, and becoming actual friends, just started off by commenting on their content. This isn't going to happen in every case, and you shouldn't have that expectation, but it is a side benefit of actively engaging with other people on the platform. You want to build relationships. And there are two types of accounts that you want to do this with. Number one, obviously, is ICP accounts, so ideal customer profile accounts, people who could be customers of yours. If they're posting on LinkedIn, you want to be commenting on their content so you're showing up in their feed. But what often happens is sometimes there aren't that many actual customers of yours that are going to be posting on LinkedIn. But what there are other thought leaders that those customers are following already. So you can use their comment section, again, as a billboard for your profile. And your target audience is going to be consuming content from these influencers, and they're going to start seeing your engagement on the post and get curious, check out your profile. If your profile is set up like a landing page, as we've discussed, you're going to convert those people into followers of your own. I don't want you spending hours and hours of your day leaving comments. People will suggest this. You're a founder. You have other stuff to do that's often more important than leaving LinkedIn comments, but I would suggest spending 10 to 15 minutes per day on comments. It doesn't take that much time, and if you can just leave a handful of thoughtful comments on other high priority accounts, it's going to turn into meaningful results for your own content down the line. Now, the second piece to outbound engagement is outbound connections. And as I've mentioned, you can brute force your way into people's feeds without relying on the algorithm. One way you do this is through those connections, because when you send a connection request and they accept the connection request, it counts as a mutual follow. So upon accepting your connection, they're now following your content. So what you want to do is build a list of ideal customer accounts. If you're doing any sort of ABM, you already have a target list of accounts. Just go through those companies and send connection requests to decision makers at these companies. And you don't need to send a message. All you got to do is send a blank connection request. That actually tends to work better because it doesn't look as salesy. And as long as you're intentional about who you send these connection requests to, there's a pretty good chance they're going to connect. As far as a cadence here, I'd recommend sending 20 outbound connection requests per day. There is an upper limit on how many connections you can send based on LinkedIn rules. So you can't just spam this endlessly for obvious reasons, but send 20 per day, you'll be in a good spot. Now, there's one last thing that I need to mention that's important to know about growing on LinkedIn. You see, one of the most important parts about LinkedIn growth is understanding the algorithm, how it works works and how to take advantage of it. But it usually takes months to learn that on your own through trial and error. So if you click right here, you can skip the guesswork and the blood and tears that it's going to take you to understand how this thing works and find out exactly how you need to engineer your content to beat the algorithm in under 6 minutes. So I'll see you over there in a second.